Which is better, the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G or the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Now, both of these devices were recently launched by Samsung, and they both are considered mid-range phones. These devices do have quite a bit in common, however they do have quite a few differences as well, which I'll be highlighting all throughout this video. Now, with the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G, we have a 6.4-inch display compared to a slightly larger 6.5-inch display with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. Now, in addition to that, both of these displays do feature Corning Gorilla Glass 5, which does make them decently durable. And you probably also noticed that with the Galaxy A33 5G, we do have a water drop notch compared to a hole punch for the front-facing camera with the A53 5G. Now, I certainly do prefer this hole punch format in comparison. However, at the same time, I do feel like both phones still do have a pretty decent setup here, and they both feature very practical form factors. Now, in addition to the displays being slightly different in size, there also are some other differences as well. Now, one similarity is that both displays are Super AMOLED, which means that you're going to get really good colors and great viewing angles as well, which is another nice premium touch that we have here with the devices. Now, with the Galaxy A33 5G, we do have a 90Hz refresh rate, which is a bit more premium compared to a 60Hz refresh rate, which we typically find nowadays with lower-end devices. So what that means is that navigating around the interface here is going to be a bit smoother compared to a phone with 60Hz. However, the Galaxy A53 5G takes things even further with a 120Hz display. So this refresh rate is even smoother and even more premium, which of course is a nice thing. Now, both displays are 1080p. With the A33 5G, we have a PPI of 411 compared to a PPI of 405 with the A53 5G. And both devices do feature 20:9 aspect ratios, which means that we're getting a more narrow but taller form factor here, which is actually pretty consistent with most higher-end phones that have launched within the last several years. Now, with the A33 5G, we have an 83.7% screen-to-body ratio, compared to an 85.4% screen-to-body ratio with the A53 5G. Now, one reason for that is because of the setup here with the front cameras. Having that notch with the A33 5G does take up a bit more screen real estate, but also this device does have a little bit of a thicker bottom bezel as well compared to the A53 5G. Now, the next difference is the front-facing cameras. Now, with the A33 5G, we have a 13 megapixel front-facing camera compared to a 32 megapixel front-facing camera with the A53 5G. Now, both of these devices do feature two different storage configurations. They're both offered in either 128 or 256 gigabytes of storage, and both devices do feature microSD card expansion compatibility. So if you do happen to fill up the internal storage on either of these two phones, then you can always offload photos and videos, for example, onto a microSD card. Now, neither of these two phones feature wireless charging, which is a bit disappointing, but they do both feature in-display fingerprint sensors, which is another thing that you typically don't find with mid-range devices. But let's give this a try on both phones, starting with the A33 5G. And there we go, it worked pretty quickly. We'll give it a try now with the A53 5G. There we go, that worked very quickly as well. And what's nice also is that both phones do support Face Unlock, so you can set up both of those, the fingerprint sensor and Face Unlock, to have multiple methods for getting into the phones. So that's certainly a really convenient thing. Now, moving on to the cameras on these devices, you probably noticed that the overall layout of the camera modules is almost identical. In fact, when looking at the back panels of both phones, they nearly look identical other than them being in different colors. However, both of these colors are available on either device. So this color is peach, this one's in blue. So if you want to get the A53 5G in blue, you can do that. And then the A33 5G is also offered in peach. So that's pretty nice. And there are several other colors available as well. So definitely take a look at the various links in the video description to not only see the most up-to-date pricing for both of these phones, but also to see all the various colors available in your region. Now, even though these camera modules do look identical, the actual cameras in them are different. So with the A33 5G, we have a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera that can capture images at up to 123 degrees, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode, and a 5 megapixel macro camera for close-up images. And then with the A53 5G, we have a 64 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle camera that can also capture images at up to 123 degrees, a 5 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode, and a 5 megapixel macro camera for close-up images. So essentially, we're getting pretty much the same camera hardware features with both devices. It's just that with the A53 5G, we do have higher megapixel counts. Now what's also nice is that both of these phones do support portrait mode with both the rear and front cameras, and both of these phones also support 4K video recording for the front and rear cameras as well. Now here's how things look on the camera apps on both devices. This is with the main camera right now. Then from here with both phones, we can switch over to the ultra wide angle cameras, which does allow us to fit quite a bit more content into the frame here. We can then switch over to the More tab to find the macro camera. So there it is right there, macro. So with the macro camera, like I mentioned before, you can get very close up and have things be in very good detail. Then we can move over to portrait mode to get those nice blurred out backgrounds. And then we can flip around to the front facing cameras in both devices to do the same thing as well. So you can take portrait mode selfies, you can also take standard selfies too. And another nice thing is that we also have a group selfie option, so it does crop out a little bit in case you want to fit multiple people in one front facing photo. Now as far as processor and RAM go, both of these devices do feature the same processor, which is the Samsung Exynos 1280, and hence the names of both devices. That processor does give you the ability to connect to 5G networks, so that's certainly very nice. I know at this point in 2022, you can definitely still get by with just 4G LTE. However, it's certainly nice having the ability to connect to your carrier's latest 5G network, and that's certainly the future as things are heading that route, that's for sure. Now, as far as RAM goes, that could be different based on which version of these devices you get. That also can differ based on region as well. So I know for the A33 5G, this phone is offered in 4, 6, and 8 gigabyte of RAM options, whereas the A53 5G is offered in both 6 and 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now it just happens that with both of these phones, they do feature 6 gigabytes of RAM, so the actual RAM and processor configurations are identical with both of these devices. Now I did run a benchmark test with both phones using Geekbench 5, and I'll show you the scores right now from that test. But essentially, with the A33 5G, I got a single core score of 694 and a multi-core score of 1865, whereas with the Galaxy A53 5G, I got a single core score of 742 and a multi-core score of 1910. Now it might seem kind of strange that the two phones have different scores despite having the same processor and same amount of RAM. However, it is possible that with the A33 5G, they might underclock the processor a little bit just to give us a little bit of differentiation between one phone and the other. I'm not exactly sure, of course, why this is, but that's really my only guess. But the good news though, regardless, is that with both of these phones, you should expect to get pretty solid performance with them. So they're definitely solid mid-range devices when it comes to that, which is certainly a good thing. You want to have a phone that works at least. So these phones will give you no issues with getting through the interface, sending texts, going on social media, doing phone calls, watching video content. Pretty much all that stuff is going to work great on both devices. Really the only situations where you would want more power is if you're doing high performance gaming, for example, or maybe you're doing actual video editing on your devices. Then I suppose in that case, you will want to have a more powerful processor. Now both phones do feature 5,000 milliamp hour internal batteries, so very large batteries here. You should definitely expect to get at least a full day, if not 2, of usage. And both phones do support 25 watt fast charging. So having 25 watt fast charging is great as well, because since we do have very large batteries with these phones, you will at least be able to recharge them fairly quickly. Now, as far as software goes, it's pretty much identical here. Both phones have Android 12 with Samsung's One UI 4.1. It's also awesome that Samsung has pledged to give their devices in the A series at least 4 years of major software updates. That's pretty much unheard of with pretty much any manufacturer of Android devices outside of Samsung. So I certainly hope the other competitors catch up to that. But for now, if you want to get a mid-range phone that runs Android and you want to get the maximum amount of Android software updates as the years go on, then Samsung is pretty much your best choice when it comes to that. So good job Samsung with taking the lead. Now both of these devices do feature NFC. They also feature IP67 dust and water resistance, which means that you can take them underwater for up to 1 meter for up to 30 minutes. And these phones both feature stereo speakers, so if you're listening to music or watching a video, for example, you are going to be getting audio coming out of the main speakers in the bottom and the earpiece up top. So it will give you a very immersive audio listening experience, which is definitely a great thing to see. Now, taking a closer look at the hardware of these two phones, they do have quite a few similarities, but at the same time, many differences. I already, of course, talked about the front panels here, where the differences pretty much consist of having a slightly smaller display with the A33 5G, a thicker bottom bezel, and a water drop notch up top, whereas with the A53 5G, we have smaller bezels and then a hole punch for the front-facing camera. Taking a look at the left side of both phones, you can see that the actual sides of the devices are different in the sense that we have a matte finish with the A33 5G compared to a glossy finish with the A53 5G. Now, these phones are made completely out of plastic besides the displays, which are glass, but despite that, both phones look and feel pretty premium. They certainly don't feel cheap at all, which is definitely a great thing. Now, taking a look at the left side of both phones, we have nothing. Then on the right side, we have volume up and volume down, and then the power buttons as well. Then up top here, on the A33 5G, we have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card, and then both phones do feature noise-canceling microphones. Then on the bottom of the two phones, we have microphones, USB-C ports for charging and data transfer, and the main speaker. And then with the A53 5G, we do have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card. Now, one thing that is missing from both of these phones is a 3.5mm headphone jack. So if you do want to use traditional wired headphones, you are going to have to get an adapter to plug into the USB-C port, or you're going to have to use Bluetooth headphones. And then, as I mentioned before, which it's also pretty obvious, we have a nearly identical setup on the back of these two devices. I personally think Samsung really made a great choice as far as the form factor and look of these phones. They certainly look really nice, but they are pretty much the same as far as things are on the back. So in conclusion, I don't see too many reasons to get the A53 5G over the A33 5G. Of course, the good thing is with the A53 5G, it is at least better in every way compared to the A33. However, there really aren't that many benefits. I suppose it really comes down to availability in your region, and then also what these phones are being offered at. I know, for example, in the US, the A53 5G gets some really solid discounts from various carriers, so most people are not going to even be paying full price for this phone. So keeping that in mind, that's another factor that you'll have to think about when deciding which of these two phones to get. But I'm definitely curious to know what you think about the Galaxy A33 5G and the Galaxy A53 5G. Definitely let me know in the comment section below. But I hope you enjoyed this comparison video. This is Kevin here, and I will see you in the next one.